Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, as you know, we are having discussion on clinical psychology. Yesterday and day before yesterday, we discussed the child psychology and adult psychology. Today, we will talk about psychodiagnostic of tools in the clinical psychology. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in studio Ms. Swati Mehta. She is a clinical psychologist. She works in a leading hospital in Delhi. So I hope her knowledge and personal experience will help us to understand this psychodiagnostic in a new perspective. So on behalf, I welcome Ms. Swati for EduSet lecture. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you. So we're going to do psychodiagnostics today. What do we mean by psychodiagnostics? It's actually dealing with helping us to deal with the personality and know about the underlying human behavior. It is a branch of psychology which is concerned with the use of tests and the evaluation of personality with the help of different methods which are specialized in diagnosing the psychopathology and quantifying the degree of psychopathology. It uses different various methods, written, oral and projective, and they would be giving us individual differences in cognition, values and personality. The history of psychodiagnostic goes back to the 19th century first quarter. It was very subjective and qualitative, wherein the subjective bias of the individual would play the role, where only we would observe an interview and based on that our analysis were given. The second half came with a different perspective to all when Wilhelm Wundt in the middle second half of the 19th century established his laboratory, and he gave us the quantitative methods for psychodiagnostics. The late 19th and earlier 20th century came with the emergence of statistics, which helped us in scientifically analyzing the data that we obtained from the various psychodiagnostic tools. The origin comes from the civil service examinations as well as development of individual and group tests in cognitive ability and psychometric theory. The 1960s to 1980s gave us the new development in the form of neuropsychological testing, wherein we would deal with the brain and its lobes. Also, we would like to know the importance of psychodiagnostics. What all is required and why is it important to use psychodiagnostic tools? Because all the time we cannot be so accurate with our observation and interview, so it gives us diagnostic accuracy. It also helps us to formulate a tailor-made treatment plan for an individual. It also helps us discover newer possibilities for a tested person to help him further his personal growth, professional growth and self-motivation. Requirements for psychodiagnostic tools. It should be socio and culturally adaptable in the form of that even if it is available in a different culture and different society, so the assessment features and different tools should be like that it can be easily bring upon the adaptability to a different culture wherein it has to be adapted. Also, the language and task should not be very difficult. It should be that there should be simplicity of them, so that differently they are not perceived by different individuals. It should be perceived, the task and the language, it should be perceived by different individual in the same manner. And time limits are also set. They should not be very long, because then it is difficult to maintain our task performance. Also, we need to set some test standards to compare the individual with the representative sample. The phases of psychodiagnostics, they include collection of data, processing and interpretation of data, decision making and prognosing the progress and the treatment of the patient. So, while collecting, we can afterwards process and interpret the data, on the basis of what we will decide the diagnosis, and we will it will let us know the prognosis, how much the progress would be made in what manner of the patient and the client. Various settings use psychodiagnostics. Some of them are clinical settings, where in hospitals, private clinics these days, school settings also, like school counselors and career counselors also use. Employment environments, wherein specifically these days military, police departments, they are invariably using a lot of psychodiagnostic tools with the help of a professional. Forensics also give us a detailed psychodiagnostic. Criminal cases and child custody and insurance settlements these days to rule out malingering. What all kind of referrals we get for psychodiagnostic? So, first would be suspected mental retardation or poor intellectual functioning, learning disability, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and childhood disintegrative disorders, pervasive developmental disorders, and for specifically the children and adolescents who are very aggressive and has a habit of acting out behavior, mood disorders, anxiety, panic disorders, patients who are experiencing some kind of trauma, who have experienced trauma, substance abuse, suspected personality disorder, psychotic disorders like schizophrenia, delusional disorder, psychosis, which accompany substance abuse, and depression or dementia. There are some ethical principles that need to be laid down on the basis of which we would be conducting these various psychodiagnostic tools and tests. The first of all, it is very necessary that we develop a professional relationship before we initiate any kind of process, including the psychodiagnostic test. When we develop these professional relationship, the role of the counselor or the clinician or practitioner would be to first lay down and tell all about the what all financial requirements and give the consent form to the client. After which the conditions would be agreed upon by the client and he would be signing a consent form, and he would be knowing all the information about the kind of test, the requirements of the test, the length and the time of the assessment, and what all would be expected after the assessment. Then the second ethical principle would be to give them surety of the privacy, confidentiality, in the form of the information whatever is being shared by the client would not be shared to any third party until unless we obtain a consent from the client. Involucy would be to deal with the negative feelings. It basically involves the task and the information that is being asked to the client through the tests and the psychodiagnostic tools. There are some information that the patient would not like to think about or would not like to share about. So the negative feelings that are coming when the client is sharing such kind of information is to deal with these negative feelings. Labeling and restriction of freedom is very important. We need to be careful about when we are dealing with a client. So we need to be careful about when the diagnosis is coming. It should not be in the form of a label, because it can lead to some harmful effects in the form of the person can face some kind of social avoidance, and they may themselves tag their freedom in the form of restriction. They may avoid responsibilities. They may start seeing themselves in the same light as they have been labeled, and they may act in the same manner as they have been diagnosed. There are various types of tests that are available. There are categories in which these psychodiagnostic tests are divided. One would be the human ability. Human ability is further divided into and classified into first is the achievement test, which helps us to evaluate an individual about what he has till now has learned, and it actually measures the prior activity of the client. Second would be in the human ability aptitude test. Aptitude tests help us to evaluate an individual capability and measuring the capacity of future potential. Then would be the intelligence tests, which generally give us a picture of the potential of the client to solve general problems. Then we have a major chunk which comprises of personality tests. Personality tests can invariably be objective and subjective both. Objective, definitely it includes presenting the specific stimuli and asking for specific reasons. Like true and false question, they just need to tell us the specific, according to them, what is going according to their behavior and the frequency of that behavior, just in the manner of a yes or no answer, simply. Projective would be more ambiguous stimuli would be presented in the form of ink blots, drawings or photographs. They would be asked for less specific response in that, in the manner that whatever they would have their opinion about, they would be telling us the opinion that they hold about these drawings, about these photographs and ink blots. Various tests are included in this, like thematic perception test, Rorschach ink blot test and draw a person test. These all are examples of some projective tests. Then what are screening tests? These are brief and less precise that help us to diagnose the target condition and to identify their cognition and to help us know the important comorbid condition. For example, if an alcohol abuse is present in a patient with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, at the initiation of care. Then it would be rating scales. Rating scales also help us to know there are two forms of rating scale. They may be divided into, classified into patient rated, which are called self-report rating scales, and clinician rated, clinician administered rating scales. They help us to quantify the severity of the disorder after the presence of the disorder has been established. They are administered at any time during the treatment. They can be administered at any time during the treatment, which help us to monitor the progress of the treatment and to know what all would be required to do to reach a certain goal of the treatment. Reasons for using rating scales would be to determine how well the treatment is working. It helps linking a clinical work to empirical research, like we do characterize, we do reach to a conclusion wherein we need to select some kind of subject, some kind of individual suited to a particular study that that would be required to study a particular research, and providing a systematic method for asking like key symptoms like sleep, eating habits, energy, and to help us know on a regular pattern, a regular schedule. These rating scales help us. So then we would be having symptom or disorder specific rating scales, like depression. We have some examples of symptom order rating scales. First would be Beck Depression Inventory. This is a clinician rated rating scale. Then we have Hamilton Depression Scale. These are subject rated self-report scales. Then we have some scales which are both subject rated and clinician administered. Montgomery-Åsberg Depression Rating Scale is an example of it. Then we have anxiety disorders. Beck Anxiety Inventory is an example. Hamilton Rating Scale for Anxiety, Panic Disorder Severity Scale, and Social Phobia and Anxiety Inventory are all example of rating scale that help us to deal and know about the anxiety disorders. Then we have Obsessive Compulsive Disorder Rating Scales. Yale-Brown Obsessive Compulsive Scale is one of them. Then we have Manic, Bipolar and Mixed Symptoms Rating Scale, which till date we have a famous Young Mania Rating Scale to help us know about these disorders at length and to quantify the severity of these disorders. Schizophrenia rating scales are also available. These are some of them are the Positive and Negative Syndrome Scale, PANS, and Psychotic Symptom Rating Scale, CIRATS. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is one of the common disorder which has a very good rating scale available. Conners parent and teacher rating scale is one of them. Then we have a childhood autism rating scale, CARS, which help us to know about the presence and the severity of the autism disorder in children. Neuropsychological assessment forms a very important and core part of psychodiagnostics. The goals of this neuropsychological assessment includes it helps us to know the extent of the impairment to a particular skill. Then it helps us to locate an area of the brain which may be injured or which may have been damaged after some kind of injury, to help us devise a rehabilitation program for the patient who have been suffering from some kind of neuropsychological ailment, to measure the change in functioning over the time. Like we want to know the consequence of the surgery to a particular part of the brain. Then we can assess a particular client after the surgery and know what all is required to be done, or how is the brain functioning for that particular client. Or in fact, we can also administer a rehabilitation program, like we formulate a rehabilitation program, and afterwards we can establish a neuropsychological assessment to know how the impact of the rehabilitation program is coming upon the client. Then what all kind of neuropsychological tests we have, the patient who come for the referrals for neuropsychological tests. There are many who come for neuropsychological referrals. So what all are the indication for neuropsychological tests? The first would be for example, the children who are not achieving their appropriate developmental milestone. Supposedly, the parents are coming with the complaints that their child has not attained the appropriate developmental milestones, like walking, like sitting without support. So these are some examples wherein the indication for neuropsychological assessment. So we have a different battery for children neuropsych battery, which would be administered to know whether the child is suffering from any neuropsychological deficits. And also the infants, when they are in utero, when they are about to be born, they are exposed to some kind of drugs, alcohol or illness. So there may be some kind of neuropsychological deficits while they are still in the womb. So it would give us a better plan to about the neuropsychological deficits. Also, if a patient has undergone some kind of head injury, and patients who have been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, so to know about their functioning of the brain and to know about the impairment of the disease, neuropsychological battery would give us a better picture and would help us to plan out the rehabilitation program for them. And also wherein some people who are meant to deal with chemicals or toxins as their work, as their daily scheduled work, and they're expected to work with chemicals and different various kinds of toxins, so it may affect the functioning of their skills, of their motor functioning. Supposedly their visuospatial functioning is being impacted upon, or their motor skills are impacted, or supposedly they are not able to remember the information they were prior to function in a better way, as reported by them or as reported by their family members. So then these are indications for us to have a neuropsychological assessment, which would help us deal with the patient in a better way. Then substance abusing patients, they also undergo some kind of brain changes, if at all, by frequent and intensive abusing of a particular substance. They may impact upon their functioning. So it would help us have a better clinical picture of them and their functioning of the brain. Stroke victims is very common when they have been diagnosed with a particular lobe having a particular clot. Maybe various reasons. Some of the common reasons are smoking, and inhaling of some kind of substances. So they may need to undergo some kind of neuropsychological assessment to help us know wherein the functioning of the different lobes would be administered. Then patients with dementia, like wherein they are starting to forget the information, they are having difficulty in remembering the information. So that would give us a better picture of them and their functioning of the brain and their lobes. Thank you.
So these were the psychodiagnostic. So what assessment you do before administering the test?
What assessments we
Yeah.
do? First would be the clinical observation and the interview when the patient is coming to us. So we would require to have a detailed clinical history of the patient, and wherein we would be interviewing the patient and their family members or anyone who are accompanying them, so that we can have an objective overview of the information and not a subjective one wherein we are only having the information from the patient. And after the observation and the information and a detailed clinical history, that would give us a brief screening picture of the patient, which would help us to know what all tests are required for the patient, what all assessment are required, and the comprehensive psychological evaluation would then be conducted.
Okay. So as first you observe the patient history and family history, and then only you decide.
Exactly.
So is this necessary to go through all these tests before diagnosing the schizophrenic patient or the other patients, or other behavior itself will reveal, or sometimes maybe the test will not be so much you can say clear. You cannot do, but in behavior we find that kind of abnormality.
Okay.
So in that case, how you do make a corrective, you take corrective measures?
Okay. Not all the time we administer these tools. Specifically, as I said earlier also, they are indicated when specifically a client is presenting us with a confusing clinical picture, wherein we are having an idea of 2 or 3 symptoms comorbidly existing, and then we decide based upon the history and a detailed clinical interview that we need to undergo a particular assessment and what all is required to be indicated in the assessment. So based upon that, we decide to conduct that assessment, and not otherwise we conduct the assessment. So it helps us to have a clinical picture in a clearer and a effective manner to help us plan the treatment.
So it's a kind of supplementary sort of things.
Not always as a supplementary, but basically it helps us to have a boost in the form of when we need to formulate a treatment plan. So it always gives us a clinical picture of the patient in a manner wherein in a standardized way we can formulate a treatment plan for the patient, and based upon that we suggest the ways to be taken care of, and the patient themselves can know about themselves in a better way, wherein they can grow themselves as an individual in a better way and a positive manner.
Okay. So these tests are predictive in nature, so in both in behavioral as well as chemical observations.
Hanji.
So chemical abnormality may also be detected. Yeah, for that we need another sort of the tests.
Not chemical, but yeah, definitely it would be indicated that the various lobes of the brain and various parts of the brain, they are functioning in what manner. If at all they are deficit, they would be taken care of, whether they would be referred to a neurosurgeon, or whether they required to undergo a rehabilitation, rehabilitation. And otherwise they give us a detailed picture of the human behavior and human personality.
Okay. So what are the new procedure or the new test that has come into effect in India? Because previously these were not the tests undertaken, only the behavioral observation were done, and the psychologists were advising to the patients and taking sessions. So what are these new tests have come to India, and it's only in metros it had come to the different parts? What information you have?
Some of the tests are very standardized and they have been undergoing, like we have adapted the intellectual functioning test from VAPIS, which is the Wechsler Adult Performance Intelligence Scale, adapted as Mellon's Intelligence Scale for Indian children. And some of the standardized tools that have been that we are dealing with to diagnose a particular condition and particular disorder would be a Rorschach blot test, It is a very good test which helps us to have a diagnostic feature of the problem. And thematic perception test, these are projective tests, but they have a standardized tool. They are very standardized, and technically they give us a clinical picture of the patient in a manner that helps us to reach a diagnosis.
Okay. So, do these tests have side effects also?
No, not at all.
Totally free.
Totally. They are administered as a paper pencil test and as a rater scaling and asking various questions to the patient.
Okay. So, but all that patients, or you can say the people who are suffering from these tests, in fact, they have the mental disorder sort of the thing. So they don't first want rely on these tests, and they don't readily going to take these tests. So in that case, what sort of advice, or what sort of the things you people do? How they could be persuaded for this? Because this is a major part. Somebody in family or the person known, they forced to go through these, etc. So how you people tackle this problem?
The first step is to psychoeducate them about the problem, about the symptoms, and to let them know about this. The first step is to let know the family members and the patient about the problem, the symptoms, because for them it is also a condition wherein they are also confused about the actions, about the advice. They are there to take the advice. So we advise them that it is best to undergo the treatment plan, and before that we would be suggesting some tests which would help us to reach a particular diagnosis. After the diagnosis has come up, it would be better for us to formulate a plan based upon that diagnosis that has come after the assessment. And in that assessment, the time limit is not particularly told, but we are explaining them the whole procedure. We are informing them and having their consent, and this is the first step before before the initiation of any kind of assessment, whether neuropsychological, whether psychological.
Okay, so are these tests general in nature, or the disease specific?
They are not disease specific. They are letting us know, apart from neuropsychological assessment, the neuropsychological assessments are only meant for the brain functioning and its lobes functioning, and to know us the impairment after the head injury or the problems that I have earlier told. The various tests that we are using are psychological tools. They are dealing with the personality of the patient, the behavior of the patient, and how their thinking and emotions are actually affecting their behavior and impacting upon their behavior, and the actions they are taking after their thinking and emotions they are thinking about the problems.
In some of the people, you find that they are also not only going through the behavioral changes, but also psychiatric problems. So in that case, yeah, to what extent we can say the psychoanalysis session work, or a combination of both could be taken up, yeah, one by one? In, means neurological problem and also the psychological problem.
Yeah.
How that kind of patient be tackled?
When we are dealing with them, definitely first of all the step would be to conduct both the comprehensive psychological evaluation, and if at all the symptoms are coming from a neuropsychological deficit, we conduct the neuropsychological assessment. Both the assessment give us a clearer picture whether they both are comorbidly existing, or whether the impact of only organicity in the form of neuropsychological deficit are coming in the form of brain functioning, and brain functioning in the form of deficits. And only if they have been ruled out, whether only a psychological ailment and psychological condition is there for us to address upon. So based upon these three possibilities, the treatment plan is made and addressed to the patient and their family members and their caretakers.
Okay, so session generally how long of duration? How long it should be?
It actually depends upon the patient, but we have limits of different various tests as their different limitation. There are tests which are having different, they are subdivided into various parts of the test. So they have different duration, like basically the aptitude and the achievement test. They are time limit tests. and otherwise even if we are conducting a projective test, there is no specific time limit for them, but they should not be too long because then it is difficult for the patient to maintain their performance. So it is specifically depending upon the patient in projective tests, and also they would be requiring, like Rorschach plot, it is specifically required to finish in one session only. We cannot divide and decide upon ourselves to divide it into two sessions, but there are various tests which are subdivided into parts, and they have different time limits like 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and the whole test then would take around like 2 hours or 3 hours, but they are subdivided.
What about the schizophrenic patients whose behavior cannot be predicted, and they also go through the different mood reflexes? Say sometimes they also go through the fear and other kind of the things. So in administering the test to schizophrenic patients are difficult and may not be a kind of a regular or the you can say consistent basis. So in that case, how you can arrive at a certain conclusion?
When a schizophrenic or a schizophrenia has been earlier diagnosed and a patient is coming to us after a particular treatment he has been taking, or even if he's taking some kind of treatment earlier upon, and he's coming for a second advice, or his family members and specifically caregivers, because they are very keen about the process and the procedure, so they come to us for a specific advice. Then by interviewing the patient and observing, we analyze the interview and we come to a conclusion whether we need to have a assessment or not. When we are having an assessment, we need to keep in mind what all indications are to be noted upon and what all indications are there. Obviously, if a patient is violent, then a certain suggestion would not to be conducting the assessment, or would to wait for some time and let him have the consultation of a psychiatrist for psychiatric medications, so that after that you can monitor the progress of the treatment. Not to conduct in a phase wherein the patient is not very keen and violent, or supposedly if he's not in his mode of administering. But there are patients who are showing some kind of reality impairment issues, and we need to come to a conclusion whether it is schizophrenia in sense, or whether they are suffering from some kind of delusional disorder, or whether they are having some kind of psychosis which is comorbidly existing with the depressive symptoms, or substance abuse is causing this problem of the reality impairment.
How does it work to a non-conforming subject? Those who are unwilling to abide by any prescribed rules or prescribed medicine or the sessions. So for them, is there any alternative way of treating them?
There are various confidential ways to handle them. If the first step of the clinician as a professional would to be let them have their own time, to give them the time wherein they don't feel restricted, or they don't feel they have been pressurized for something they don't want to do. So let them have their own environment. Right. If at all the condition of the patient is not very directing in the manner that we need to conduct the assessment, we definitely have ways of handling the medication part and let them have their treatment in wherein we psychoeducate the caretakers.
So sometimes they also become violent. So a test can predict that this subject could be violent after this or that, or this thing a test fails to predict about the violent mood changes in the subject.
Definitely, if you want to know predicting
tendency of violence.
Yeah, tendency and frequency can be because the personality of the individual and the behavior at the present moment is being evaluated. It is not very precise and it is not very structured. We are for these kind of patients, we are having projectives which are giving an ambiguous situation to a patient to express themselves, wherein they can express express any kind of thoughts, any kind of emotions. They are very free to express any kind of behavior. So wherein it would be giving us an indication of their particular personality and of their particular behavior, and to help us suggest to the people around them, and to suggest them the better ways of handling their client.
Okay. So sometimes what we see that the basic principle, like if some are emotionally disturbed, so it is said that provide them a kind of outlet where they can just get out the feelings which they have suppressed so long. So what are the basic sort of the treatment should be given to all these psychological, or we can say the mental disorder people that could not do harm in doing so? So is there any sort of the treatment to
Only for the violent patients?
no, not violent, for all, so which can help them, especially those people who are unaware of this kind of treatment and might be listening to the, so that get benefit and handle practically to with this kind of people. What is the
Okay, so the thing is, first of all, there are three dimensions to it. There are three ways in which we can handle a particular client. The first would be whether the patient is indicating only towards the psychiatric medication. The second would be wherein the role of only psychological therapy and counseling comes into the picture, and there are certain clients who are indicated for both the medication part and psychological therapy and counseling. Most of all, the beneficial one is wherein both go hand in hand for most of the patient, mostly apart from the ones who are not having sense of reality, and their sense of reality is impaired. So the beneficial one for the others, mostly which is indicated upon, is the psychological therapy and medication both.
okay? So but what is the general belief that medication may change the balance of chemical equilibrium of the
Proportion.
body?
Yeah.
So that's why people of the subjects, they don't prefer to go for the medication. So what is the how a psychologist think this should be practiced, or it should be outrightly rejected by the family member of the patient? Because patient might be agree, but the family member think that if we administer some medicine, maybe a chemical imbalance, other kind of the difficulties may be seen in the subject. So how to handle this kind of situation?
Yeah, so as I told you earlier also, before initiating the assessment, we let them have the information about the indications of the assessment, what all is required, and why is it important for us to conduct the assessment. After that, even if we are coming to a conclusion as a diagnosis, it helps us to psychoeducate the family members, the caretakers, and the patient himself, to let them have a clearer picture of what they are going through, and to let them have a picture wherein they can also have a belief that even if they are having a belief that they are not having a very good sense of self-confidence, then they can be helped to reach a stage wherein they can be motivated and encouraged, to let them have a sense of belief wherein they can monitor their own progress and can function and have a better professional and personal growth. And also for the family members, we need to psychoeducate them that obviously we are prevailing in a society till now, in an Indian society, it may be perceived as a taboo in certain areas, but not enough. It has reduced to a significant intensity, and it may also be like that we can tell the family members that we undergo different medications for different ailments, different physical ailments or different ailments. So like this is also a particular part of the treatment which would help us to have the patient in a better condition, and which would help us also function in a better way with him, and he can also function in a better way.
So is there any kind of sequence of tests, like while doing diagnosis, be take as first X-ray, then other things. So there are certain such kind of sequence in also assessing the mental health of people.
We may take help from some rating scale, as I also told you. The rating
What are the
scales,
basics and what are the specialized? That's I want to know.
like in what sense? Screening
Like
tools and
for say for chest problem, first one go for the X-ray, then another ultrasound, then CT scan, such kind of things. Is also in the assessing the mental health of the people. Are there?
like for depression, for anxiety disorders, for various disorders like ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for autism, we have various rating scale, as I told you earlier as well. Different rating scale give us a clearer picture whether the particular disorder is existing. If it is existing, in what terms it can be quantified in the terms of severity, and then we can further move on to have a better evaluation of the emotional functioning and the personality of the patient, wherein we progress to different personality and projective tests.
So the major problem of mental disorder, I think, maybe the survey or the research may suggest a different story, but the major I think is the schizophrenia, Parkinson disease, and illusions, and other one more research. So in this case, how often we should, what precaution one should take, or how initial, what are the characteristics that initially will help to understand and consult the doctors? Is there any such kind of thing, characteristic things which will help to identify it in the earlier stage?
The symptoms themselves indicated to the patient and their family members, wherein the patient himself is observing some kind of changes in his behavior, some kind of change in the way he is handling the situation, like if he's observing some kind of change in his daily routine and biological functioning in the form of sleep, appetite, energy levels, the change in the functioning of the behavior in the form of whether he is having sadness of mood very frequently these days, whether he is becoming very irritable these days, or whether he is feeling like crying without any reason. There are various indicators and different indicators pertaining to a particular condition, and also the family members and the people around them, their colleagues, their friends, their peers, they can also observe some kind of changes, or wherein they are observing not only the changes, wherein the family members have been observing some kind of particular behavior that has been existing for a long time. So it can be reported as an indicator if they think it is advisable for them to consult a professional and take an advice, wherein they can be suggested what all they require to do, what all is needed. Okay.
Okay, so I think these are the basic things one must take. In case a patient goes through both schizophrenia and Parkinson disease, because Parkinson itself is a very recently, I think medicine has also come that helps. So people are now relying on the medication. So as a clinical psychologist, what you suggest? They should go for the medication, then come to the this kind of the session, or the first they go for the session and then come to the medication, or both should start together?
It is depending again on the condition and the indicators of the behavior, wherein a psychiatric consultation is required. You need to consult a professional. The indicators then would indicate whether we need to go for further treatment, in what sense, whether we need to follow an assessment first, and then the treatment would be based. So it is not a tailor-made thing that we need to go for some patients, it is required, but then you need to consult a professional to let you know what all is required for the client.
Okay, so it depends upon the different clients' natures and different how different
the symptoms, the conditions, the indicators.
Okay, so the role of doctors. And the last question I would like to ask you: all these be performed under under the surveillance of an expert, or one can learn it, family member learn it, and can also administer at home? Because sometimes patients when they go to the hospital, mental hospital especially, so they don't feel, you can say, good. Yeah, seeing that I am not mad, that is a stigma in the society. That's why. So a family member can learn the way they can treat it, and they can administer it at the home or not.
No, there are these only are standardized tools which are meant to be only and only used by professionals.
Question.
Otherwise, they cannot be processed and analyzed in the right manner, and it is not ethical. It is only administered in a professional setting with the help of a professional, and it should be done in the same manner.
Okay, there are certain people that go on under phobia, some are for water, some other things, they with different phobia. So how they could be handled? How could they be handled?
In this manner also we need to have a detailed history wherein a particular
The
patient
basic things is so that because this is the problem of, you can say, most of the people suffers at certain point of the times, and early age, someone older age. So it comes in, you can say, the all of us. So how can overcome this? Phobia could be overcome through these practices. How? What are the basic things to do?
There are various techniques. But it depends upon patient to patient how they are needed to be dealt upon. Because if two individuals are suffering from same phobia, there may be various reasons underlying them. But different phobias can be dealt with the help of cognitive behavioral therapy, which would help us have a detailed history of the patient, and then we would go on to psychoeducate and deal with the different techniques that are underlying this cognitive behavioral therapy. Like exposure therapy is one of them, wherein we would be exposing the patient to a particular thing due to which they are feeling fearful, and to let them have a realistic sense of them, and also to desensitize them, like gradually recognizing all the objects, all the things which is contributing as a phobic stimulus for them. So we would surely let the patient have their own time, make a hierarchy of all the things that they think is causing them distress, and then we would be dealing with them one by one.
Okay. So, well, friends, we tried to find out what are the basic or you can say the tools available through which we can assess the mental health, and also find out the problems and how it could be overcome. And in very simple language, Ms. Swati Mehta tried to explain these things. So I hope this lecture must have benefited all of you. So I also thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf I thank Mrs. Swati Mehta for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.